All right, so welcome to this deep dive. And today we're looking at Revelation chapter 14.
Yes.
We're going to be going through these notes from MCS Revelation chapter 14.
Okay.
And let me tell you, this chapter is pretty dramatic. It's all about the harvest of the earth, which is a big deal, even in a book like Revelation.
Absolutely.
So are you ready for some pretty epic imagery and symbolism?
Always.
Okay. Well, this chapter really paints this picture of what happens right after the rise of what some scholars call the unholy trinity from the previous chapter.
Yeah.
So it's like setting the stage for this final showdown between good and evil.
Right.
So let's jump right in.
Okay.
Okay. Verse 1 throws us right into this vivid scene with 144,000 people standing on Mount Zion with a lamb.
Yeah.
Now, we know that the lamb represents Jesus.
Yeah.
But what about Mount Zion?
Right.
That's not just any random mountain, right?
No, definitely not.
What do you think John, the author of Revelation, is trying to say by putting this scene on Mount Zion?
Well, Mount Zion has always held like a lot of symbolic weight, especially in Jewish tradition.
Okay.
It's seen as this place of holiness, excellence, the very heart of God's presence here on earth.
I see.
It's like you're trying to reach excellence in your own life.
Yeah.
You're aiming to fulfill the purpose God has for you.
Right.
Mount Zion represents that ultimate goal, that place where God's plans are totally realized.
So seeing the Lamb Jesus standing there, it connects redemption with the fulfillment of God's purposes.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like John is giving us a glimpse of this ultimate victory, the culmination of everything that God is working towards.
Right.
And right there with Jesus are 144,000 people marked with his name and God's name.
Yes.
So what about that number?
Okay.
Should we take it literally, like there will only be 144,000 people in heaven?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Revelation is definitely full of symbolism, and numbers are a big part of that symbolism.
Yep.
So the number 144,000, it likely represents the fullness of God's people. Okay.
The complete body of believers from all nations and throughout history.
So it's not about a specific number. It's about the idea that all of God's people will be gathered with him in this final victory.
Exactly.
And speaking of victory, verse 2 jumps right into this full-blown celebration.
Yeah.
Rushing water, thunder harps playing.
Yeah, it's a party.
It feels like this huge cosmic party is about to start.
Right.
What's with all this crazy sensory imagery?
Well, John is trying to give us like this sense of overwhelming joy and anticipation felt by everyone who stayed faithful to God.
Okay.
Imagine, the relief, the exhilaration of knowing evil is about to be confronted and justice will win.
Okay.
The thunder and the rushing water, maybe that represents the shaking of the old order, everything wrong, breaking down.
Interesting.
And then the harps, they represent the beauty and harmony of God's kingdom finally being established.
Yeah, it's an incredible picture.
Yeah.
And then they start singing this new song.
Right.
This song that only the 144,000 were understanding it as all believers can learn.
So this song feels kind of exclusive.
Okay.
What sets it apart?
Well, think of the song like a metaphor for understanding and joy that comes from having a relationship with Jesus.
Okay.
It's not about excluding anyone,
Right.
but highlighting the experience of faith.
Okay.
Like an inside joke, a shared language only those who walk the path of faith can get.
So it's about this deep connection with God through faith in Jesus,
Exactly.
which leads us to verse 4, and it kind of takes a turn.
Okay.
We go from this happy celebration to talking about defilement.
Right.
And it seems a little out of place with all the excitement.
Okay.
What is this defilement that John's talking about?
Yeah, it's important to understand that defilement here isn't about being physically pure or impure.
Okay.
It's about spiritual purity.
Gotcha.
John is talking about idolatry worshiping false gods.
Okay.
These believers are called first fruits because they stayed faithful to God in a world that embraced fake idols.
Now, this first fruits thing, that's interesting. Sounds like there's more to come, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
You have to picture the ancient Jewish harvest festivals.
Yeah.
The first fruits were like the first portion of the harvest,
Right, okay.
offered up to God as a symbol of gratitude and dedication.
I see.
And these first fruits represent the best of the harvest.
Yeah.
And they pointed to the full harvest that was still coming.
Okay.
So in Revelation, the 144,000, they're like those first fruits set apart for God, and they're like the beginning of a much bigger harvest of souls.
So these believers are a preview, a foreshadowing of the full gathering of God's people at the end of time.
Exactly.
And that leads us to verses 6-11, where we meet not one, not two, but three angels. each with a message to deliver.
Yeah.
What's the deal with these three angels and their messages?
These angels are like heralds,
Okay.
each one proclaiming a crucial part of God's final plan.
Gotcha.
So the first angel has the eternal gospel, the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ. It's a message of hope for all people, a final call to turn away from those fake idols and embrace the true God.
So it's like a last-minute invitation to join that celebration we saw in the earlier verses.
Yeah.
To be part of that redeemed multitude on Mount Zion.
Exactly.
And the second angel's message really underlines that invitation.
Right.
He announces the fall of Babylon.
Yeah.
Now, when we say Babylon, we don't mean a literal city.
Right. No, not at all.
What does Babylon stand for in Revelation?
Babylon here represents the world system that's against God,
Okay.
everything that's corrupt and pulls people away from God.
So like greed, materialism, violence, all that.
Yeah, all of that, the pursuit of power and worshiping those fake gods.
Okay.
So this angel announcing Babylon's fall means this corrupt system is about to collapse.
It's a warning for those who side with it.
Right.
They'll face judgment.
Exactly.
It's a total opposite to the joy and celebration of the redeemed.
Yeah.
This angel's message really raises the stakes. And then the third angel, he delivers a warning about the beast.
Okay.
Now, this figure shows up all through Revelation.
Right.
But for those who are new to the book, who or what is this beast?
Yeah, the beast is probably one of the most interesting and complicated symbols in Revelation.
Okay.
It represents this powerful force that's against God and tries to trick the world. Many scholars think it represents human governments or systems of power that promote bad stuff and try to stop those who follow God.
So this third angel is warning about the consequences of worshiping this beast.
Exactly.
So it's a warning against putting our trust in anything other than God.
Right.
These three angels' messages really make it clear how urgent things are.
Yeah.
It's a call to make a choice to pick a side in this cosmic battle. But for those who choose to follow God, it won't be an easy road.
Right.
Verse 12 really stresses that God's people will need to persevere during this time.
It does.
What stands out to you about this verse?
Well, this verse speaks directly to those who chose to follow Christ. And it acknowledges that they will face challenges, persecution, opposition for their faith.
Right.
The world under the influence of the beast won't be welcoming to those who oppose it.
But even with this warning about persecution, there's this strong affirmation of faithfulness.
Definitely.
It says, this calls for patient endurance on the part of the people of God who keep his commands and remain faithful to Jesus. What does this tell us about the kind of faith needed to withstand these tough times?
It's not a passive faith.
Right.
One that just accepts things.
Yeah.
It's active and resilient, a faith that holds on to God's truth even when everything feels like it's falling apart around you.
Right.
It's a faith that pushes through hardship knowing that God has the final victory.
Okay.
It's a faith that keeps God's commands, not because of fear of punishment,
Yeah.
but because of love and devotion.
That's a powerful challenge, especially when the world tries to make us compromise what we believe for comfort or acceptance.
For sure.
But for those who stay strong, verse 13 offers a bit of hope. What does it mean that those who die in the Lord are blessed?
This verse brings a deep sense of comfort and reassurance.
Mm-hmm.
It tells us that those who die while staying faithful to Christ find ultimate rest and peace being with him.
Okay.
It's like a reminder that even when facing death, those who belong to Christ have nothing to be afraid of.
That's beautiful and reassuring.
It is.
Their faithfulness, their perseverance leads to eternal rest and reward.
Right.
And then in verses 14, 16, the whole scene changes dramatically again.
Okay.
We see Jesus not as a gentle lamb, but as this powerful figure
Yeah.
riding a cloud with a sharp sickle.
Right.
What's going on here?
What's the meaning of this imagery? This is where the harvest we've been talking about becomes really clear.
Okay.
We've seen the redeemed celebrating the warning of judgment, the call to persevere.
Right.
And now we see the one who will actually carry out that judgment, the
Right.
one who separates the wheat from the chaff.
It's a powerful image.
Yeah.
Like John's drawing a clear line.
Yeah.
He's showing us there are consequences for our choices, and the time for deciding is running out.
Exactly.
And that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We'll explore the imagery of the harvest, the separation of the good from the bad, and what it all means for us today.
Sounds good. So as we get deeper into this harvest imagery, I think it's important to remember that even though the imagery in Revelation 14 is pretty intense,
Yeah, it can be.
even disturbing at times,
Yeah.
it's not supposed to scare us into submission.
You're right. It's not about fear.
No.
So if it's not about fear, then what is the purpose of these vivid descriptions of judgment.
Okay.
What is John trying to tell his readers and us today?
I think it's about understanding the weight of the choices that we make.
Okay.
Think about it. We're always bombarded with messages telling us what to believe, how to live, what to value.
Yeah, that's true.
Revelation uses this symbolic language, this powerful imagery, to paint a picture of what happens ultimately if you choose those paths that lead away from God. But it also, and this is really important, it offers hope and reassurance to those who choose to follow him.
And that hope really does come through.
Yeah.
Even in the middle of all those descriptions of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
We see it in the joy of the 144,000 in that statement of blessing over those who die in the Lord.
Absolutely. Revelation, even though it has this intense imagery, it's ultimately a book about victory,
Go count.
about God's triumph over evil and suffering.
Right.
The judgment, it's a necessary part of that victory,
Yeah.
a separation of those who are with God from those who choose a different way.
And that makes me think about the whole first fruits idea again.
Yeah.
If these believers, the 144,000, represent the best of the harvest, what does that tell us about the kind of life we should be living now
Right.
in the present, even before that final harvest?
It's a challenge for all of us, isn't it?
It is.
To be considered among those first fruits,
Yeah.
to be seen as blameless before God, it takes a life of faithfulness, a commitment to doing what he says and staying true to what we believe, even when it's hard,
Yeah.
even when the world is pulling us in another direction.
That brings us back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
The need to persevere in tough times.
Right.
It's not easy to stay strong in your faith when the world around you has different values, promotes a different way of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And Revelation 14 doesn't hide from that reality.
it doesn't.
It acknowledges that a lot of believers will be persecuted,
Right.
but it also offers encouragement. Stay strong, remain true, and know that your faithfulness will have its reward.
You know, as we're talking about this, I'm struck by how the chapter emphasizes both individual faithfulness and this idea of a collective harvest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's personal responsibility happening at the same time as this huge cosmic event.
It's this beautiful tension, between the individual and the group.
Yeah.
A reminder that we're part of something bigger than just ourselves.
Right.
Our individual choices, they matter. They shape our own destinies. But they also contribute to this bigger story of God's plan to redeem humanity.
It's kind of like a tapestry
Yeah,
where each thread, each individual life adds to the whole picture.
I like that.
And in that tapestry, Revelation 14 seems to be drawing this line between those who follow God and those who don't.
That's right.
It goes back to that idea of allegiance we talked about.
Yeah.
Who or what are we truly dedicated to?
Right.
Do our actions, our priorities match up with God's will or the values of the world?
Yeah, it's not about being perfect because none of us are.
Of course not.
It's about where our heart and ultimately where our loyalty lies.
So it's not just about avoiding certain behaviors or following a bunch of rules.
Whoa.
It's about something deeper, this internal alignment with God's will,
Yeah,
a desire to live in a way that honors him and shows his love to the world.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that alignment, that desire to honor God should be seen in everything we do.
Okay.
Not just in big gestures or religious rituals,
Yeah.
but in everyday choices, how we treat people, what we focus on.
That's important.
Yeah.
The harvest isn't just this far-off event.
Right.
It's about what we choose every day, the small acts of faithfulness or unfaithfulness that shape who we're becoming.
I love that you brought up the everyday part of it because
Yeah.
so often when we read about these massive events,
Yeah.
it's easy to feel like our little lives don't really matter.
Right.
But Revelation 14 reminds us that's not true.
No.
Our choices, our actions, they have eternal significance.
Yeah.
They ripple out, impacting not only ourselves, but
Yeah.
the people around us,
Yeah.
and ultimately playing a part in that final separation, that harvest that will happen one day.
You said earlier that Revelation is ultimately about victory.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this chapter, with all this talk of judgment and separation, point us toward that victory?
Well, it shows us the stark reality of the fight between good and evil,
Okay.
but it also reveals that God will win, for sure.
Right.
The judgment, as tough as it is to think about,
It,
is a needed step towards setting up God's kingdom.
Right.
A world cleaned up from evil and suffering and made whole again.
and that victory isn't just about the wicked being punished, right?
No.
It's about the good people, the ones who chose God and endured hardship, being redeemed and vindicated.
Exactly.
The harvest isn't just about separating the good from the bad.
Right.
It's about bringing those good people into God's eternal kingdom.
Okay, a place of unimaginable joy and peace and perfect fellowship with him.
Which brings us back to that image of the 144,000 with Jesus on Mount Zion.
Yeah,
That's the ultimate picture of victory, isn't it?
it is.
Being together with Christ in that place of perfection and fulfillment.
It really is a reminder that even though we might go through tough times and persecution now, our real hope is in that future victory of being with God forever.
It's a powerful message.
It is,
One that makes us think about how we're living today.
for sure.
As we move to the last part of our deep dive into Revelation 14, I'm excited to see how these themes connect to the big picture of Revelation
Right.
and what they mean for our lives today. There's a lot more to discover in this chapter.
There is.
So much wisdom and guidance for dealing with the challenges and opportunities in a world that often feels so far from Mount Zion.
Yeah.
So we've really dug deep into Revelation 14, haven't we?
Right.
Yeah, we've explored all that symbolism, those ideas of judgment and salvation. But there's this big question hanging in the air.
Yeah.
What does all this mean for us, in this day and age?
Right.
How do we take the message of Revelation 14 and apply it to our everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's easy to get lost in all those dramatic images in Revelation
Yeah, I know what you mean.
and forget about what it means for us personally.
Yeah.
But this book, even with all its apocalyptic language, is really about how we live now.
Right. It's not just about some prediction of the future from a long time ago.
Exactly.
Like a guide for how to navigate life today.
It is.
So how do we translate these massive cosmic ideas into practical things we can do?
Yeah.
What does it actually look like to persevere, to be
Yeah.
counted among those first fruits in a world that feels so far from that vision of Mount Zion?
Well, I think we need to go back to that idea of allegiance we were discussing.
Yeah.
Who or what are we really devoted to?
Right.
Are we living in a way that lines up with God's will, or are we following the values of the world?
Okay.
And again, it's not about being perfect. We're
Yeah.
all human.
We are.
It's about the direction we're heading, the choices we make every single day.
Yeah. And those choices, like we talked about, have a ripple effect, don't they?
They do.
They impact not just us, but the people around us too,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately contributing to that harvest, that separation of those who follow God and those who don't.
Exactly.
It's a pretty serious thought,
It is.
but it's also kind of empowering in a way,
Okay.
because it means we have a part to play in this bigger story.
Absolutely. Our lives matter.
They do.
The choices we make, how we treat others, the values we hold on to, they
Yeah.
all matter. They shape the world and they contribute to how human history ultimately unfolds.
That's a lot of responsibility,
It is.
but it also means there's so much potential for good.
Right.
We can be bringers of hope, instruments of God's grace in a world that really needs it.
Exactly. And that's where the message of Revelation 14 becomes so encouraging.
Yeah.
Yes, there's judgment. Yes, there's separation coming.
Right.
But for those who decide to follow God,
Yeah.
there's also the promise of victory, of eternal life, of being part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. It makes you think of that verse we talked about earlier.
Which one?
How blessed are the dead who die united with the Lord from now on.
Oh, yes.
It reminds us that our real destination, our true home, is with God.
Absolutely.
And knowing that should shape how we live now.
It should.
If we really believe that harvest is coming, that there will be a separation of the righteous from the wicked,
Mm-hmm.
then we need to be deliberate about the kind of life we're living, the kind of fruit we're producing.
It's not about earning our salvation, though.
Of course not.
That's a gift we get through faith in Christ.
Right.
But it is about living in a way that reflects that gift.
Mhm.
It's about showing our thankfulness for the grace we've been given.
So it's about letting that grace change us from the inside out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shaping our thoughts, our actions, how we relate to others.
Right.
It's about becoming more like Christ.
Yeah.
So that when that harvest comes, we're ready to be welcomed into his presence.
That's a powerful image to end on.
It is.
And it leads me to a final thought for you, our listener.
Okay.
The chapter talks about those who die in the Lord being blessed.
Right.
What does that idea of being blessed mean to you? What kind of life do we need to live to be considered among those first fruits of the harvest?
It's a good question.
It's a question worth thinking about
It is.
as we try to navigate this complicated and often difficult world,
Yeah.
trying to live in a way that honors God and leads others to Him.
I think it's a question that sticks with you long after you've finished reading Revelation.
It does.
And I think that's the power of this book.
Mhm.
It challenges us. It inspires us.
It did.
And it gives us questions that make us want to dig deeper,
Okay.
to try to understand God's plan and our place in it better.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Revelation 14.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning,
Yeah.
and keep living in the light of God's truth.
Yeah.